Hey team, I wanted to give you a quick overview of what objects are, how they apply to GitLab, and then how you can use objects actually to inform your UX strategy. So let's start out by just quickly jumping into what an object is. So an object is like a typical pattern that we'd find at a high level within the product. And an object is made up of different regions, and regions are made up of different components, and components are made up of different foundations. So we have an object which could be something like an issue. An issue then is broken down into multiple regions, like say a page header and a filter. And then page headers and filters can be broken down into little components like buttons or drop downs, and then components can be broken down into things like the colors, the typeface, things like that. So each object has a specific purpose, which is linked to one or a few jobs to be done. And that object is optimized towards fulfilling that job to be done. So an MR object, one of the key jobs to be done there would be around making a change to the code base and then collaborating around that change. So each object is very much focused on a specific job to be done and allowing users to achieve that goal as effectively as possible. So if we apply this thinking to GitLab, I'll call that section anatomy. If we apply that section, that thinking to GitLab, we can think about the core sort of workflow objects in GitLab as like a user, and then a repo, which is the the code base, holds the code, and then we have if the user wants to make a change to the code base, they would maybe create a MR and use that MR to collaborate with some peers, some other users around that change, and then finally integrate it into the code base and ship it and deploy it to their infrastructure. And if they wanted to talk about some more broad issues or plan their work, they could potentially use issues as an object to do that. And then the workflow for issues would look something like a user creates an issue, they discuss and collaborate within the issue, and that issue can be broken down into multiple MRs, which are then shipped to the repo. Now, if you extrapolate this and say we have 1,000 users, and those 1,000 users are creating 10 MRs and 10 issues and all that sort of stuff, you soon find that these workflow objects, which I'll call them here, become quite unruly. So what we need to do is to organize these objects in some way and organize the information within them. And the way we do that is with organizational objects. So if you think about all these right here, this is actually a project. And then a project or multiple projects can make up a group, and then multiple groups can make up an instance. So we're working within GitLab on an instance, and then there may be multiple groups within GitLab, like gitlab.com and gitlab.org, and there may be multiple projects within each of those groups as well. And these are organizational objects that help us to organize all this information that's happening right now with the users. Okay, so we have this core workflow right here. We have our organizational objects, and now we need to help users track and improve their workflows and customize it in ways that are meaningful for them. So we do that with tracking objects. Pardon my handwriting. So tracking objects are things like labels, like milestones and epics. So labels give users flexible ways to tag and manage the different workflows happening within here and make it their own. Milestones sort of scope the work happening within a particular time frame, and epics scope the work around a particular topic or initiative. And these are tracking objects, as I talked about. And then finally, we have the users working on all this sort of stuff. They're able to organize their information effectively with projects and groups, and they're able to track their workflows effectively with these tracking objects. Now, there's a lot of stuff going on, and looking at the objects at an individual level isn't necessarily going to give them insights around the way stuff is organized or their workflow or how things are tracked. So what we need to do is create or use some visualization objects to represent multiple objects at a time, and also help users see and spot patterns or anomalies happening within their data. So, for example, we could use or think about visualization objects as a list, maybe a board that we have in plan. We also have things, these would be new, but if we think about having a data set, and that data set's represented as a table, and we can visualize that data set with a chart, we'd call it a report. And then multiple reports can be sort of aggregated together into one page, and we could call it a dashboard. So this is visualizing information at different levels of abstraction to allow users to spot patterns, but also allow them and enable more interesting workflows like we have within the Kanban board. So how does analytics use the object model to inform their UX strategy and plan their work? I'm going to change to a nice little color. So right now, analytics is focusing on two things. One, it's creating a analytics and data visualization platform. And the way that we're doing that is by thinking about objects and then using these objects to inform and refine the components, regions, and foundations underneath. So if you think about what the foundations team are, they are basically approaching our design system from this bottom-up perspective right here. They're built out the foundations, building out components, and then what we can do as stage groups is take thin slices of the objects, components, and foundations to refine them in the context of actual working GitLab, and also prioritize what work needs to be done with regards to components, because the objects will inform what regions are needed, the regions will inform what components are needed, and the components will inform what sort of foundations are needed. So there's this nice sort of top-down and bottom-up action that's happening by collaborating between stage groups and the foundations team. And the analytics team is going to focus and prioritize our work by focusing on these two objects right here, the report and the dashboard. So by creating the report and the dashboard objects, we will get a better understanding of what components and what regions are needed to support GitLab as a whole for more generic contexts. And then finally, we're also focusing on the value stream. And we can think about the value stream as basically this little workflow here. And that workflow, the value stream, and then there's some fancy CI/CD magic going on to deploy the stuff, is what we call a value stream. And this entire workflow generates a lot of data. And what we want to do is visualize this data in unique ways. One, by using these reports and dashboard objects, but two, by also showing it as a unique flow. So that's it. We have workflow objects, we have organizational objects, and we have tracking objects, as well as visualization objects to help users to achieve their workflows and collaborate with one another. Objects are composed of different regions and components and foundations, and you can use this object model to think about where you invest your effort as a stage group in order to prioritize what sort of component work that you're contributing to the design system will get you and the rest of GitLab team members the most bang for their buck. So hopefully that makes sense. I will share this image, my chicken scratchings, with everyone, and I'm looking forward to your feedback. Thank you very much for listening with me.